The cold night and a cry for help. The wind was sharp like knives that night. Cold air moved through the streets of the human city. People walked fast, heads down, coats tight. No one wanted to stop. No one noticed her. The alien girl walked slowly. Her legs were weak and her feet were bare. Her skin was pale blue and her eyes were wide with fear. She'd not eaten for days. Her clothes were torn and thin, not made for the cold. Every step hurt, every breath burned. But she kept walking. Past tall buildings, flashing lights, and busy roads. Cars moved by without slowing down. People looked away when they saw her. Some even crossed the street to avoid her. She was just a strange, dirty creature to them. Not someone who needed help. Not someone who was dying. She had no name in this place. On her planet she had been called Nira, but here she was nothing. Her hands shook. Her body leaned to the side. Her head spun. Then, it happened. Her legs gave up. She fell to the ground, hard. She didn't move. The cold floor touched her skin like ice. Her eyes slowly closed. She thought this was the end. People passed by. Some looked. No one stopped. One man even kicked snow toward her, laughing. She didn't hear it. Her body had stopped feeling pain. Her heart slowed. Her breath was short. But then, someone did stop. A man stood a few steps away. He was tall, with tired eyes and old boots. He held a hot cup of tea in one hand and a paper bag in the other. He looked at the girl on the ground. At first he did nothing, just looked, like everyone else. But something inside him turned. Maybe it was the way her arms were curled tight, or the purple bruises on her thin wrists, or the way no one cared. Whatever it was, he dropped the cup, stepped forward, and knelt beside her. He touched her neck. She was still alive, but barely. Without thinking more, he took off his thick coat and wrapped it around her. Then he lifted her in his arms. She was light like a feather, frozen stiff like a piece of wood. He walked fast. The snow was falling harder now. The cold air hit his face. But he didn't stop. People stared. Some whispered. Some laughed. One woman shouted, "Why carry that thing?" He didn't answer. He just held the girl tighter and walked on. His name was David. He lived in a small house at the edge of the city. He didn't have much. Just a few old things. A heater that worked when it wanted and a small bed. But when he reached home, he placed her gently on the couch, lit a fire, and started boiling water. He took off her wet clothes, careful not to hurt her. He wrapped her in warm blankets. He placed a hot water bottle near her side. Then he waited. Her face looked softer in the light. Not scary, just tired, just broken. There were marks on her arms, old ones and new ones. She had been through pain, not just from the cold, but from something else. He didn't know what. Not yet. Hours passed. He gave her small drops of warm soup. Slowly, her breathing grew steady. Her eyes stayed closed, but her fingers twitched. She was fighting to live. David stayed up all night. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know if helping her was safe. But he knew what it felt like to be alone. He had lost his wife years ago. No kids, no family, just silence. Now this girl, alien or not, was someone who needed him. He couldn't turn away. Morning light touched the window. The storm outside had stopped. But inside the house, warmth had returned. A new kind of warmth. The girl moved. Her eyes opened just a little. She saw fire. She saw a roof. And then she saw the man. She tried to sit, but her body was too weak. Her lips parted, but no words came out. David knelt beside her and spoke softly. "You're safe now. Don't worry. I won't hurt you." Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, not from fear, but because for the first time in her life, someone had shown her kindness. She didn't know his name yet, and he didn't know her past. But in that small moment, something started between them, something strong, a quiet promise in the firelight. And far away in the darker corners of the city, someone else had noticed her too. Someone who wasn't kind. Someone who was watching. But for now, she was warm. She was alive. And she was not alone anymore. Her first warm night. Nira opened her eyes slowly. Her body felt heavy, but for the first time it wasn't because of pain. It was warmth. Real warmth. She was covered in soft blankets. A quiet fire crackled nearby, filling the room with a golden light. The air smelled of wood smoke and something kind. She blinked and tried to sit up, but a sharp ache in her side stopped her. She gasped softly. That was when she saw him again. The human man who had saved her. He sat across the room, half asleep in a chair, with a book still open in his lap. His clothes were old, and his face had lines of tired years, but his expression was peaceful. She stared at him for a long moment. Why had he helped her? No one ever had before. On every planet she had been dragged through, people had seen her as a burden, a tool, or worse, an object to be owned. But this man had seen her collapsed in the cold and given her his coat. And now she was safe inside his home. She tried to move again. This time the blanket slipped off her shoulder. That's when she noticed her arms. Someone had cleaned the wounds. Someone had wrapped them in soft cloth. Her bruises still hurt, but they were no longer bleeding. Her collar was still there, but it felt looser. The lock had been damaged. He had tried to break it. She felt panic rise inside her chest. What if this was another trap? What if kindness was just another mask? Her heart beat fast. She looked around the room, searching for an escape. But then the man woke up. He looked at her and smiled softly. "You're awake," he said, standing up slowly. He didn't come too close. "Don't worry, you're safe here." Nira didn't speak. She only stared, her eyes full of fear and confusion. The man raised both his hands and took a small step back. "My name's David. I found you last night. You were freezing in the street." Still, Nira didn't respond. She didn't trust words anymore. Too many lies had been wrapped in sweet voices before. Instead, she reached for the glass of water on the table beside her. Her hand shook. She tried to lift it, but her fingers slipped, and the glass fell. Before it hit the ground, David caught it. "It's okay," he said calmly. "You don't have to talk, you don't have to explain, just rest." He placed the glass gently back on the table and walked to the small kitchen. There, he poured warm soup into a cup and returned with it. He placed it on a tray and set it down on the table near her. The smell made Nira's stomach twist with hunger. She hadn't eaten anything warm in days, but she still hesitated. What if it was drugged? What if it was a trick? David saw her doubt and sighed. Without a word, he picked up the cup and took a sip himself. Then he smiled and held it out to her. Nira stared at him unsure, but her hunger was stronger than her fear. Slowly, she reached out and took the cup. She drank carefully, letting the warmth flow into her chest. For the first time in so long, her body didn't hurt as much. Her mind began to clear. David sat back in his chair and waited. He didn't push her for answers. He didn't ask questions. He just watched to make sure she was okay. After a long silence, she spoke in a soft voice, broken and dry. "Nira." David looked up. "Is that your name?" She nodded once. "Well, Nira," he said with a kind smile, "I'm glad you're still with us." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. Showing weakness had never been safe. But here it didn't feel like a danger. It felt strange. Like maybe this man truly meant what he said. That night, Nira didn't sleep in fear. She slept in warmth. Her body was still healing, and her heart was still full of scars. But something had shifted. She was not a tool here. She was not a number or a slave. David slept too, this time on the floor with a blanket. He didn't lock the door. He didn't tie her hands. He gave her space and trust, and outside the snow kept falling. But inside that little house, the fire kept burning. Two lives, one broken by pain, the other by loneliness, had started to come together. Not by force, not by need, but by one simple truth. Kindness had found a way in. The secret she hides days passed, and Neera's body grew stronger. Her skin no longer looked so pale, and the shaking in her hands had slowed. She still didn't talk much, but her eyes watched everything. Every small sound made her flinch, every shadow made her pause. Even in safety, fear still lived deep inside her. David noticed the way she never turned her back to the door. How she slept with one hand always near a sharp spoon she had hidden under the couch. He didn't question it. He only made sure she had warm food, fresh water, and peace. One morning, while David was fixing a leak in the roof, Neera walked to the small mirror in the hallway. She slowly removed the loose cloth around her neck. The metal collar was still there, dull, scratched, and locked. A tiny blinking light had gone dark days ago, but she didn't trust that it was fully off. This collar was not just a sign of ownership. It was a tag, a tracker. It told others where she was, who she belonged to, what she was. But Neera wasn't just a normal alien girl. Her blood was different. It had been changed, shaped in a lab far away, deep in a black site that never saw sunlight. She had been made, not born. Her kind was rare and expensive, valuable to the wrong people, and dangerous. She turned away from the mirror, hiding her face in her hands. She couldn't stay here, not with him. David was kind, but if they found her, he would be punished, maybe even killed. She had seen it before. Humans were not spared if they helped someone like her. That night, while David cooked something that smelled like roasted potatoes, Neera sat by the window. The outside world was still frozen. Snow covered the ground like a thick white blanket. And under that blanket, danger was moving. David noticed her silence. "Something bothering you?" he asked gently. Neera looked at him, her throat tight. She opened her mouth but then closed it again. She wanted to tell him. "But how do you explain that you're not just a girl? You're a hunted weapon." "Instead," she whispered, "you should not have helped me." David blinked. "Why?" "Because they will come," she said, voice trembling. "They always come." David put the spoon down and sat across from her. "Who will come?" Neera stayed quiet. "Is someone looking for you?" he asked again. She nodded slowly. "Bad people. They used me, hurt me. I ran. But they don't let things go. Not when it costs them money." David frowned. "You're not a thing, Neera." She looked away. "To them, I am." David stood up and walked to the shelf. He pulled down a small black box. Inside was a tool, old and heavy. He brought it over and sat beside her. "Then let's start by taking off that collar." Neera froze. "It will alert them." "Even if it's off?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I was never meant to be free." David stared at the collar, thinking. Then he said, "Well, you are now. And no one's going to take you while I'm around." Neera's eyes filled with tears again. Not from fear this time, but from the strange warmth she didn't know how to handle. Kindness still confused her. That night, while she slept, something else happened in the city. A man wearing black armor entered a local bar. He showed a picture, blurry but clear enough. People shook their heads, but coins were offered for answers. Big coins, dangerous ones. The hunter had arrived. He was not a soldier, not a cop. He was something worse. He worked for the people who owned the labs, who made and sold living beings, who treated aliens like machines. And now he was close. The next morning, Neera woke up to find the collar gone. David had worked through the night. Burn marks were on his fingers, but he smiled. "You're free now," he said. She touched her neck, hardly believing it. But her joy didn't last long, because deep down she knew they would not stop. And if they found her here, David would pay the price. The hunter arrives. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind, the kind that warned something was coming. Birds stopped flying. Dogs stopped barking. And in the heart of the city, the air grew still. Neera felt it first, a pressure in her chest, like cold fingers closing around her lungs. She woke before sunrise, her body tense, her senses sharp. She stepped to the window and looked out. Snow still covered the streets, but something felt different. The world seemed to be holding its breath. Far away in a dark alley, heavy boots touched the ground. A figure stepped from a sleek black vehicle that didn't belong to any Earth company. The man was tall and wrapped in black armor. His face was hidden behind a mask, but his eyes glowed faint red through the visor. He didn't knock, he didn't ask questions. He simply began to hunt. He showed the image of a blue-skinned girl to merchants, cleaners, street children. Some ignored him. Some lied. Others stared too long and said nothing. But none of it mattered. He was not searching with eyes alone. His scanner picked up traces of her DNA from the very streets she had once collapsed on. David didn't know about the hunter yet. That morning, he made toast and eggs and offered them with a quiet smile. Neera sat at the table, still watching the window. Her food was untouched. "You feel something," David said, not asking, knowing. Neera nodded. "He's here." David looked confused. "Who?" She looked up slowly. "The one they send when they want something taken back." David didn't speak. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. He didn't ask for more details. He just stood up and began packing a small bag. "We should run," she said. "We will." But it was already too late. By noon, someone knocked on David's door. Not a hunter, a neighbor. The same man who once told David to get rid of that alien thing. Now he looked nervous. "Some strange man's asking around," the neighbor whispered. "Wearing armor, doesn't blink. Says he's with the Galactic Retrieval Corps. I've seen their kind before. You need to be careful." David thanked him, shut the door, and locked it. "He's closing in," Neera whispered, voice low. "He can smell fear." David grabbed a small metal box from a shelf. Inside was a short-range signal scrambler. He switched it on. It crackled with faint blue sparks. Neera stared at it. "You had that all this time?" David shrugged. "Old friends, old favors." But she saw the truth. David was not just some quiet man living alone. There were things about him she didn't know either. Secrets, maybe even scars. That night, they didn't sleep. Neera kept the light off and watched the sky. Every flash of movement made her heart race. Every sound made her flinch. But David stayed calm. He cleaned an old handheld weapon. He checked a hidden panel under the floor. He was preparing, and the hunter was getting closer. In a warehouse across town, the man in black stood in front of a giant screen. It showed a red dot blinking slowly. The signal was faint but not gone. She had been clever. Disabling the collar wasn't enough. There were backups, microscopic tags built into her body. They still gave off a trace. And he had found it. He spoke just one word to the screen. "Target confirmed." Back at the house, Neera stood and touched David's arm. "You should leave me." "No. He'll kill you. I've faced worse." She looked at him, her voice cracking. "Why are you doing this?" David stared into her eyes. "Because someone once did the same for me." Before she could ask what that meant, a soft beep rang from the scrambler. The signal wasn't working anymore. The hunter had found a way through. David grabbed the bag. "We leave now." They slipped out the back into the snow-covered alley. Lights from above scanned the street. A drone passed, then turned. It saw nothing. But on the rooftop behind them, the hunter watched silently. He didn't move. Not yet. Not until they were far enough. Not until they were alone. Chase through the cold snow fell harder now, thick like ash from a broken sky. The world had turned white, quiet, and deadly. Each step Nira and David took left marks that vanished within seconds. But no matter how deep, the snow, they had to keep moving. Behind them, the city lights faded. Before them, the forest stood cold and endless. Nira's breath came in short gasps. Her hands were numb. David's leg was bleeding, a long cut running down from the knee. He didn't complain. He only pushed forward. Somewhere above, the hunter followed. Not fast, not loud, but always there. Nira looked back again. "We won't make it," she whispered. David didn't answer. He just tightened the straps of the pack and kept walking. The signal scrambler was now dead. The tracker in her body was faint, but enough for the hunter to follow, and he was getting closer with every minute. They reached a narrow stream, half frozen, with sharp rocks on both sides. David tried to cross first but slipped. Nira caught him, her strength surprising even herself. She pulled him up with both hands and dragged him to the other side. "You're stronger than you think," David said, panting. "No," she said. "I'm just afraid to lose you." He looked at her for a moment. Then he smiled. "Then let's not stop." They pushed deeper into the trees. But the cold grew sharper and David's steps began to slow. Nira noticed the blood on his pants getting darker. He was losing too much. She helped him walk, arm over her shoulder, but his weight grew heavier. Suddenly, a loud sound echoed through the forest, a mechanical hum, deep and steady. Then a beam of red light scanned the path behind them. Nira's heart dropped. "He's here," she whispered. David reached into the bag and pulled out a small device. "This will give us a few minutes," he said. He threw it down behind them. A blinding flash exploded and the trees lit up with sparks. The hunter stopped in his path, shielding his eyes. But only for a second. It wasn't enough. As the hunter resumed his silent pursuit, Nira dragged David toward a broken cabin they had spotted earlier. The roof was half gone, and the walls leaned sideways. But it was shelter. Inside, Nira laid David on the floor and searched the room for anything useful. She found old cloth and pressed it to his wound. "You need help," she said, her voice shaking. David smiled weakly. "No hospitals, they'll find us there too." "You're bleeding." "So are you," he replied, nodding at her arm. Nira looked down and saw a thin cut she hadn't noticed. She ignored it. "We can't fight him." "No," David said, "but we can run smarter." Then something strange happened. As David drifted into half-sleep, Nira felt a pulse in her chest. Her vision changed. She saw energy, warm and cold, near and far. She saw the hunter's trail glowing in the dark, moving closer like a black flame. And in her hands, power began to stir. It had always been there, buried deep, locked by fear. She had been made to be a weapon, not a person. But now, she had something to protect. Not orders, not masters, but someone who gave without asking, who cared without reason. She placed both hands over David's wound. A soft light glowed from her fingers, blue and gentle. The bleeding slowed. His breathing steadied. David opened his eyes. "What was that?" "I don't know," she whispered. "They said I was made for pain, but maybe I was made for something more." Outside, the trees shook. Heavy boots crunched over snow. The hunter had reached the cabin. Nira stood slowly. She no longer felt weak. Her hands glowed again, just a little. Her eyes, once full of fear, now burned with purpose. "If he comes in," David said, coughing, "you run." "No," she replied, "not this time." She looked out into the snowy night and waited for the shadow to appear. Stand or run. The wind outside howled like a warning. Inside the broken cabin, time seemed frozen. David leaned against the wall, his face pale but calm. Nira stood near the door, her heart pounding, not from fear but from something fiercer. She had run all her life, from cages, from orders, from cold eyes that called her test subject instead of Nira. But this time she didn't want to run, not when the one person who had shown her kindness now lay bleeding behind her. The hunter was close. She could feel him, like a dark cloud moving closer, steady and without emotion. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cruel. He was empty. And that made him more dangerous than anything she had ever faced. David reached out, his voice low. "You don't have to fight him. Just go. Live." Neera turned. "I've done nothing but survive. I'm tired of just surviving." He gave her a weak smile. "Then live like you mean it. Not like you're still a prisoner." But Neera shook her head. "He won't stop. Not until I'm in chains again. Or dead. If I run now, he'll follow. And next time I may not be the one who gets hurt." She looked at her hands. They didn't glow anymore. The strange energy inside her had faded for now. But her will hadn't. She stepped outside into the snow, her breath rising like smoke. The trees whispered warnings, but she ignored them. In the distance, the hunter appeared. Tall, armored, and silent. His mask hid his face, but his intent was clear. He raised one hand and spoke for the first time. "Return, asset. You do not belong to this world." "I belong to myself," she said. "That is not your right to decide. I decide now." Without another word, the hunter stepped forward. He moved like a machine, fast and deadly. Neera ducked the first blow, rolled through the snow, and ran toward the trees. Not to escape, but to lead him away from David. The hunter followed, his movement slicing through the cold like steel through cloth. Every step he took left deep prints. Every time she turned, he was closer. She reached a clearing where the snow had thinned. She stopped and waited. As the hunter stepped into view, she raised her arms. Not to fight, but to stand. "I'm not running anymore," the hunter charged. Suddenly, a blinding light exploded from behind. A drone crashed into the trees, fried by a blast of energy. Neera turned, shocked. David stood there, barely able to stand, holding a strange weapon that sparked in his hands. "I told you," he said, breathing hard. "I've faced worse." The hunter turned, now seeing both of them as targets. But Neera had changed. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. This wasn't just about survival, it was about freedom. And not just hers, but David's too. She closed her eyes, reached deep into herself, and found the part of her they had always tried to hide. The part they had feared. The part she had locked away because they told her it was dangerous. It wasn't dangerous, it was hers. Her hands lit up once more, brighter than before. The snow melted around her feet. The air shimmered. The hunter paused, for the first time unsure. She walked forward slowly, no longer afraid. The collar was gone. The fear was gone. The past didn't own her anymore. The hunter raised his weapon. She raised her hand. The ground shook. One life for another. The forest held its breath. Snow stopped falling. Even the wind seemed frozen, as if the world itself waited to see what would happen next. Neera stood in the center of the clearing, light rising from her skin like quiet fire. The hunter, so sure of victory, now paused. He had been built for capture, trained for fear, trusted never to fail. But this was something new. Neera took one step forward. Her power was not wild anymore, it flowed steady, calm, and sharp. She no longer trembled, she no longer wished to hide. She had something to protect now, someone who saw her as more than a tool. "I'm not yours," she said softly. "I never." As the hunter raised his arm and fired. Time slowed. Neera lifted her hand and the bolt of energy stopped in the air, hanging like a frozen spark. Then it shattered, falling to the snow like broken glass. She didn't flinch. She didn't run. Behind her, David watched, eyes wide. He had never seen anything like this. But more than her power, it was her courage that left him speechless. This wasn't the same girl he had carried through the snow. The hunter charged, again. But Neera moved faster. She didn't strike to kill, only to stop. She dodged his blows, redirected his attacks until finally she touched the center of his chest with both hands. A blast of blue light spread outward, and the hunter dropped to his knees. His systems flickered, his armor cracked, And with one final breath, his mask broke apart, revealing a face, part machine, part forgotten man. He looked at her, not with hate, but with something like peace. Then he shut down. Neera fell to her knees, drained. Her body shook, but before she could collapse, arms wrapped around her. David had made it to her side, limping and breathing hard. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said weakly. "We did." He helped her stand. The cold didn't seem so sharp now. The sky above them was clear for the first time in days. Morning light touched the treetops, golden and quiet. They walked back to the cabin, step by step, together. Later, Neera stood at the small window, watching the last of the snow melt under the sun. Her collar was gone, her chains, both real and inside her, were broken. David came beside her holding 2 cups of tea. "What now?" she asked. "We live," he said. "However we want." She looked at him, unsure. "Even someone like me?" David smiled. "Especially someone like you." Neera held the warm cup and stared at the rising light. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't running. She was choosing. She had been a number, a weapon, a runaway. Now she was free, and she wasn't alone. The end